Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we are having our very first mini live lesson. I don't know if you have been to any of our other live lessons. They're usually quite big and with lots of things to do over a whole week. So today we're doing something slightly different and we're having a mini live lesson, which is just a short session with a few things for you to do later on. And I'm very excited that our first mini live lesson we are going to welcome James Stead, who is the Come Forth for Wildlife project manager for FrogLife. And today he's going to be teaching us about why it's so important to build ponds in our school grounds, in our gardens, or anywhere in our community, and how to make them properly. Today we're also welcoming his colleagues Ashley and Mirren, who we won't see on the screen, but will be supporting us in the chat. So during today's mini lesson, if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat and hopefully we will be able to answer them for you today. So I'm very excited because I just love frogs. So I am going to pass over to James right now so we can learn all about ponds and wildlife. Thank you, James.
Okay, thank you very much, Katrina. Let's just get this started then. So many thanks for having us along today then. So today we're going to find out all about ponds and the animals that we can find in our ponds and how to make a perfect wildlife pond. To begin with, so I work for a wildlife charity called FrogLife. So I want you guys to think about what we might do at FrogLife. So if you can put your hand up and let your teacher know what we might do at FrogLife, and then teachers can type into the chat feature what the pupils might think we do. So I'll always give you guys a minute or two whenever we're asking you any questions, and then Mirren can let me know what's coming through.
Okay, we're getting a few answers. So save frogs. We've got look after frogs and give them a new habitat, take care of frogs, supporting reptiles.
All very good answers. Yeah, this is looking good. So FrogLife is a wildlife conservation charity concerned with the UK's amphibian and reptile species and also their habitats as well. So all of those answers that you got there are really, really good. So an amphibian is an animal with a backbone or a vertebrate, and they can live on the land and in the water as well. And they're also cold-blooded. So that means the temperature of their body is controlled by the surrounding temperature. So you can see lots of the things that FrogLife get up to right here, whether it's digging ponds with big diggers or getting people out with spades to dig ponds or teaching people all about the fantastic species that we have in the UK in ponds and other fresh waters too. To begin with then, we've got a very short video here to inspire you guys and give you some initial ideas on maybe something you could do in your school grounds around making a pond. So we'll be coming back to ponds very shortly, but first we want to try and find out what you guys would think would actually live inside a pond. So we've got a very quick quiz here to begin with. So we'll put up the names of 3 different animals in a second, and I want you to put your hands up and then let your teacher know which is most likely to be found in a pond. So we'll start off with our first three here. Which is most likely to be found in a pond out of these three animals? So we've got an adder, a leatherback turtle, or a frog. So again, if you can put your hands up, let your teacher know which animal is most likely to be found in a pond, and then the teachers can type that in the chat. And I'll give you a minute to think about that one.
We're getting a lot of frogs in the chat.
Yeah, some good answers all around.
Yeah, more frogs.
Excellent. So we'll move on to the next one then, if people have had a good amount of time to answer that one. So which of these three animals are we most likely to find in our wildlife pond then? So we could have a toad, a lizard, or a butterfly. So which ones do you think, or which one are we most likely to find in a pond? So again, let your teacher know.
Yeah, we've got a couple of toads, one butterfly, and some more toads.
Yeah, so we're certainly very likely to see toads in our pond if we make them the right way, and not impossible that we have butterflies around them as well. But yeah, hopefully a bit more likely to see toads. So we'd like to know a bit more about what you guys have already seen. So whether this is at school or whether it's in your own garden, it could be going for a walk in a park in the countryside or something like that. So how many of you guys have seen a frog before? If you want to put your hands up so your teacher can count through the class, how many of you have seen a frog before? And then teachers can let us know in the chat section how many of the class have seen a frog.
Right, lots of people seeing frogs. We've got 21, 18, 16, 14, and lots of big groups. Fantastic.
Excellent, lots of frog sightings, that's good. How about toads before? So how many of you guys have seen toads before, whether it be in the garden or at school or elsewhere? If you put your hands up and let your teacher count how many have seen a toad before.
Oh, quite a few also saying the whole class have seen frogs and toads.
Oh, very good, excellent.
Yeah, lots of big numbers for toads as well.
Excellent. And then the last one here, then, this is a bit trickier now. How many people have seen a newt before? So if you've seen a newt before in or around a pond, perhaps, you can put your hand up and let the teacher count up again.
Right, I've got 3 in the first class. We've got 13, 7, 4. Not quite as many, but still good numbers have seen newts.
Yeah, they're a bit trickier to see the newts, but we'll come back onto those in a second. Okay, excellent. So that's good to know that you guys have seen some frogs, toads, and newts before, for sure. So we're going to look at some of these animals in a bit more detail. So we've already seen this one, but can anybody put their hand up and let the teacher know what this one is here? And then the teachers can let us know.
We've got some saying frog and some saying frog spawn as well.
Oh yeah, good point. There is frogs on there.
Quite a few frog spawn, a couple of tadpoles, and lots of frogs.
This is indeed our common frog. So some really good giveaways in terms of it being a common frog are the smooth, moist skin that we can see on the picture in the top left, and also that dark patch behind the eye as well. Again, you can see that very clearly on this picture. So they've got long back legs, so they can jump quite far. They're quite athletic. So remember how they move as well. And we can get our common frog in green or brown, red or yellow. There's quite a few different shades of colour, but they're all our same one species of common frog. So how about this one then? Again, if you can put your hand up and let your teacher know what you think this amphibian might be.
Got a couple of toads, toad and toad spawn. Yeah, more toads.
Wonderful. So this is in fact our common toad indeed. So we can see the differences between our common frog and our common toad. from the bumpy, warty skin that the toad here has, which is quite different to the smooth, moist skin of the frog, and also has a golden iris or a golden eye. So they move quite differently to frogs. So they have shorter back legs. So they tend to just crawl or walk along. They might occasionally hop, but they're not quite as athletic as our frogs. And they also produce a toxin to defend against predators too. So we're going to ask you guys, or one pupil from each class, to demonstrate how a frog moves. So hopefully our teachers have got one pupil in mind who can demonstrate to the rest of the class how a frog moves. So remember, they've got those big, powerful back legs. So we want that one pupil to jump like a frog. And we'll give you a minute to get sorted with that one and demonstrate to the rest of the class how a frog moves. So hopefully there's some very good frog impersonations going on right now of frogs jumping around athletically throughout Scotland. Give you a little bit more time to get sorted with that. And hopefully we can all remember and see how a frog moves. So if our teachers can have another member of the class demonstrate to the rest of the class what a toad moves like. So remember, they've got the shorter back legs, so they'll tend to just walk or crawl along. They're quite different to our frogs. And again, we'll give you some time to demonstrate to the rest of the class how you can walk like a toad. So you probably find it's a bit easier to move around like a toad perhaps than a frog. Depends how good you are at jumping. Okay, so hopefully we can all remember and see now what it's been like to move around like a frog and a toad. So we'll look at one of our other amphibians now. Might be a little bit harder, but again, if you can put your hand up and then let us know what you think this amphibian might be.
You've got 2 guesses at a newt.
Newt's getting there. Oh.
More newts coming in. Yeah, I think everyone's going for newt.
I'm going for newt. So newt is mostly correct. This is a particular type of newt though. And this is one of our 3 species of newt that we have in the UK. And this is the palmate newt. So the palmate newt is one that we're more likely to find in Scotland than in England. And it has a pink throat with no spots. The boys have these big black webbed back feet and a little thing we call the tail filament. So on the bottom left picture there, you can see the boys have those tail filaments as well. And those are all things that are unique to palmate newts. So here you can see a little bit from an underwater camera of our different amphibians. Our frog spawn here, developing into tadpoles as well for our common frog. And these eventually grow legs as they get bigger. And you can see the bumpy, warty skin on the toad there as well on our common toad. And one of our newts heading back to a pond, as they will do when we get back round to spring. You might also find in ponds that there's lots of invertebrates or insects as well, and they're really important for our wildlife pond too. So just some quick fun facts on our common toad as well. We've recently learned that toads can climb trees. So we think this is to escape things that want to try and eat them, so predators. They also produce toxins as well that make them taste bad to predators such as fish. And toads also make a high-pitched quack, quack, quack sound in the spring. And the deeper the quack, the larger the animal for our common toad. So now, I said that we'd get back to ponds, and now is the time to move on to ponds as well. So to begin with then, what is a pond? So a pond can be very small or very large. It doesn't always have to be a very large amount of water that's needed to be good for wildlife and good for a pond. And it might also not hold water all the year around. Why do you think we'd actually want to create a pond then? So if you've got any ideas, why would we want to create a pond in our school grounds, in our gardens, out in the countryside, wherever else it may be? If you can put your hand up and let your teacher know, and we'll hear what you guys think as to why we should create a pond.
We've got one class saying to attract wildlife.
Brilliant. Yep. Very good reason indeed.
But more people saying, yep, to encourage more animals to live there, to have fish in it, to have so that animals have a suitable environment. Fantastic. Lots about making a nice home for pond life and wildlife.
Excellent. So that's definitely some good reasons. So yeah, it's a vital home for many animals and plants, and we need ponds so amphibians and insects can lay eggs as well. But other wildlife might be around a pond too. So you might see birds and bats that are hunting nearby, and also plants will require the wet conditions that ponds have as well. So it's good for plants and for animals. But for us too, it's a great chance to see new wildlife grow and thrive, and that's really important to us as well. But we are losing many of our ponds across the countryside and the cities and towns, so replacing these ponds is really important too. So there's lots of good reasons why we might decide to create a pond. So here we're going to see some pictures from schools that FrogLife has worked with in Glasgow and in Falkirk and also in Clackmannanshire too. So these are schools that have been involved with FrogLife to create ponds and other really great wildlife habitats in their school grounds. So you can see these come together slowly but surely being dug out. Different sizes and shapes for our ponds as well. Some of them have got liners as well that have been used in the ponds. And enhancing their created ponds as well. So using native plants to make them really, really good for the animals as well. So these are some pupils in Falkirk schools creating a pond and given a bit of time as well as the grass and the plants come back too. It'll look like a really nice pond with some nice greenery around the outside too, and ending up with the very own school pond. So when we're thinking about creating a pond, we want to think about where to put it. So somewhere that's sunny and open is always going to be best. We want to avoid lots of trees being nearby because that can come with lots of leaves that fall into the pond, and those can be quite a pain to get out. And also lots of shade from the trees in the pond as well, and that makes water much cooler, and that means things like tadpoles really struggle to develop. Think about things around the pond as well. So anything that could run into the pond that we don't want to see go in there. So if it's near roads or compost heaps as well, then really bad things can go into our pond, which isn't good for the wildlife. How about the shape of a pond then? So what do we think is the best shape for a pond? What do you guys think to begin with then? So again, you can put your hands up and let your teacher know. What do you think is the best shape for a pond and for a wildlife pond in particular?
We've got round, oval, circular, oval, lots of oval, egg-shaped.
Okay.
We've got oval with layers. That's good.
So there's a few different shapes in there. So we want to try and avoid a pond that is perfectly round or square shaped. We want natural shapes are best. So things that we'd find in nature are best, and irregular outlines. And this allows for lots of shallow areas where the water isn't too deep. So you can see a couple of different ponds here, which are very much natural shapes, and these are ideal for our wildlife pond. So thinking about creating a pond and the depth, so most of our animals and plants are found in the top 10 centimeters of the water in those shallow areas where there isn't as much water. So it's really important to have those areas, but it is good to have a bit of a deeper zone in a pond as well. So that's good for frogs in winter and other amphibians as well. When they shut down for the winter, they may make use of those deeper areas of the pond. And the slope is very important as well. We don't want a steep-sided pond at all. We want a gentle, gradual slope, and that's really important for young animals, such as frogs and toads and newts that need to get out of the pond once we reach the end of summer and they've developed and it's time for them to leave. And it also means that other animals won't fall in then and be unable to get out. And it's important for people as well. So we want a very gentle, gradual slope on our ponds. Bear in mind that you may need a pond liner as well if the school's garden or the green space you're going to put your pond into doesn't hold water naturally, and we'll see a bit more of that in action in a second. So what do we need to make sure is around our pond as well? So this is a really important thing to consider. So if you put your hand up and let the teacher know again, what do you think we might need to make sure is around the pond that we're making for wildlife?
So we've got rocks, plants, stones. We have grass.
That's a good one.
Yeah, lots of grass, plants with big leaves.
Okay, definitely some good answers there. So yeah, we definitely want to see lots of long areas of grass and plants and other wildlife friendly features as well for around the pond for any amphibians that are leaving the pond. So as these little froglets and toadlets are leaving the pond at the end of summer, we want to make sure they can't get picked off by birds and other predators. So making sure there's lots of long areas of plants around the pond is just what we need. So you can see that on the pond, on the picture on the left there as well. We also need water in our pond as well. So I'll leave it to you guys to vote in just a second. Where do we think we should get that water from for our wildlife ponds? So do we think we should use tap water, or do you think we should use rainwater? So what I'll ask you to do in a second is put your hand up if you think it's tap water, and then the teacher can count up how many think tap water is best. So put your hand up now if you think tap water is best for our wildlife ponds. Give you a second just to count up how many may say yes or no. Or if you think rainwater is the best for our wildlife pond, then put your hand up now. And our teachers can let us know which one got the most votes in the chat, tap water or rainwater.
Yeah, it's looking like most are saying that rainwater is probably going to be better. Get a few more votes. Yeah, more for rainwater.
Wonderful. So yeah, that's right indeed. So we're all very, very knowledgeable today, which is good. So we want to use rainwater for our ponds. So tap water has got lots of chemicals in it, which are okay for us, but not so good for very small creatures like little frogs, toads, and newts. So we want to make sure that our pond is full of rainwater. So we're very lucky in Scotland. We get lots and lots of rain. At least most of the time we get lots and lots of rain. So we can create ponds and have a bit of patience and just allow them to fill up with rainwater. And if we do want to do so, we can always collect rainwater beforehand, collect it in a rainwater butt or something like that, and that will help us to top up the ponds as well if it is a really dry, hot period of time too. Other things you might want to think about with your pond is avoiding any problems. So fish will actually eat frogs and newts, so they're not too good in any ponds that we want to make for amphibians. So also think about any rivers or streams that are nearby. Those can bring in fish into the pond if they flood over at any point, and then that creates big problems for our frogs and our newts. And don't get tempted to bring in fish if you are looking to create a pond for amphibians and wildlife in particular. Try not to place any ponds where other valuable plants may be that we'd be losing as well. So we want to keep a nice selection of plants if they already happen to be there. And don't be tempted again to bring any plants from nearby ponds. You can accidentally bring other species of plants that we don't want to go in the pond, or you could bring in diseases by accident as well from those other plants. So make sure that we don't do that one. So hopefully in the chat in a second, Ash is going to pop in the link to just add water. So this is our guide with lots of information on a step-by-step guide in terms of how to build a wildlife pond, how to enhance a wildlife pond, and how to manage them in the future too. So do check that out. You can download that for free. And if you get around to building your own pond in the garden, in the school grounds, wherever it may be, then you can follow that throughout. So we've just got a little video here as well to show all the steps that are needed in making a pond with a liner. So again, you guys can think about whether this is something that you can do in your school grounds. So to go over some other ideas alongside ponds as well, in many instances we also create mini ponds and raised ponds. So if you don't have much space, or if budgets are a problem or anything like that, or where safety is a bit of a concern with having an open pond as well, then you can create mini ponds. And these can also be alongside a larger pond as well, because it's always good to have ponds of different shapes and sizes and different depths as well. So you can see here a few of the mini ponds and the raised ponds that we've made here. So on the right here, you can see a raised pond. We put soil and rocks around the outside, and then really importantly, make sure we have rocks inside as well, so that things and small creatures can get out of this little mini pond. And then we just let that fill up with rainwater. And you can see in the middle here, one that's just dug into the ground. But again, really importantly, make sure there's some rocks inside of that mini pond so that small creatures can easily get out when it's time to leave the pond. And again, just let that one fill up with rainwater. And these are incredibly good for frogs as well. So our common frog doesn't need large ponds necessarily in order to lay eggs. And these are really useful for our frogs if it's something that you can do in the future. Other features nearby to the pond that we could have are wildflower meadows as well. These are really good, offering shelter and cover for our frogs, toads and newts from predators and birds and other things that might try to eat them. But it's also a chance for them to find insects and eat things themselves as well. Insect hotels that we can see in the top right there. And then you could have a bog garden as well on the bottom right. You could have this near to a pond, or it could even be instead of a pond as well. So again, these offer lots of cover and shelter to our frogs, toads and newts, a place to try and find food, but also a place to cool off if it is a hot, dry summer as well. So we do want to think about pond safety, especially around schools. So ideas could be our mini ponds that we've just talked about. So we don't have quite so big a pond, but you can also have pond grills or rigid meshes that you can see on the left here as well, which make ponds really, really safe in all scenarios. Those gently sloping edges that we talked about a little earlier as well are so important, so people don't fall into ponds. And think about the pond depths as well. We don't want to have the pond any deeper than it's needed. We could also have fences and gates around ponds as well. Just make sure there's gaps for the wildlife to get in and out easily. And consider also some pond signs around the pond as well that you could make, just to let people know to be a little bit careful when they're around the pond itself. So we've got a final quiz to play here then, which is a true or false. So I'll read out some statements in a second and see what you guys have learned through our mini lesson here. So in a second, you can put your hand up if you think it's true or false. So the first statement that we've got here is frogs, toads and newts need ponds so they can lay their eggs. So if you think that's true, then put your hand up now, that frogs, toads and newts need ponds so they can lay their eggs. And our teachers can count up roughly how many say it's true. And if you think that's false, then put your hand up now. And our teachers can let us know which one the class thinks as to whether this is true or false.
Okay, and a lot of classes saying definitely true.
Yep, many trues.
100% true.
Excellent. So this one is, of course, true. We have learnt things. That's great. So our frogs and our toads and our newts certainly need ponds so they can lay their eggs from year on to the next year. And that means we can have future frogs, toads and newts, which is really, really important for our amphibians in Scotland. So it's okay to use tap water to fill up a wildlife pond. So if you think that's true, then put your hand up now. If you think it's okay to use tap water to fill up a wildlife pond. And if you think that is false, then put your hand up now. And again, our teachers can let us know in the chat which one has the most votes.
Yeah, lots of classes saying false for that one.
Yep, lots of falses, hopefully.
Yep, lots of false. Nearly everyone.
Excellent, that's good. So yeah, it is of course false, this one. So we don't want to use tap water to fill up our wildlife ponds. Again, there are lots of chemicals in there which are okay for us, but not so good for tiny little creatures. So we want to use that rainwater or collect the rainwater if we can do, and let our ponds fill up naturally and not worry too much if the water levels do drop a little bit in the summer when it gets drier and hotter too. And our last one here is this true or false? Fish in a pond will eat the frogs and the newts. So if you think that's true, then put your hand up now. And if you think that statement is false, then put your hands up now.
I've had 5 classes all saying true, mostly true. Yeah, nearly all true. A couple of people saying false, but most saying true.
Okay, I think majority of us got this one right then. So this is in fact true. So our fish will tend to eat the frogs and the newts in our pond, but not so much our toads. So as I say, the toads that we have in Scotland and in the UK produce a toxin, even when they're tadpoles, that makes them taste really, really bad to fish and some other predators as well. So some ponds with fish in will have toads for sure, but by and large, fish and frogs and newts don't tend to get on very well. And our fish will eat our frogs and our newts. So we did very well there. We remembered lots and lots of things. So that's great. And that brings us to the end before we stop for any questions. So before we do any questions, thank you very much for listening to our workshop. And we hope this has inspired you to make a pond, whether it be in the school grounds or in a local green space, and do whatever you can for your local amphibians. So thank you very much. And I think we've got some time for questions.
Yes, we've got one question in already. So first of all, what is bad about having a composter near a pond?
So compost piles and compost heaps near to a pond, when it rains, compost heaps tend to have lots of nutrients in them. So those nutrients can go into the pond, and we can end up with bad water quality in our pond. And we'll find that certain types of plants tend to take over a pond when there's high levels of nutrients. So if you've ever come across ponds before, and there might be signs up around ponds sometimes where it has algae and too much algae, and it's almost like a green slimy sort of string, basically, is what algae is. And it's okay to have a little bit of algae in ponds, it's not a problem at all, but some ponds can be dominated and choked up by that algae, and that's almost always because there's too many nutrients in that pond, and that might come from something like a compost heap. So it's always good to keep those away from the pond so they don't leach into there and run into there.
Okay, so we're getting quite a lot of questions. So the next one, James, is how many ponds have you made?
How many ponds have I made? That is a very good question. It depends whether we're talking about ponds that I've made with my own spade, in which case it's probably around about 20 to 30, or ponds that I've instructed to make with a large digger, in which case we're talking hundreds. So it depends on your exact definition of how many I've made and put the sweat and effort into, I suppose.
And then our next question is, would seawater be okay?
Seawater, certainly not for amphibians. They wouldn't be adapted to live in seawater. So we need fresh water that won't be quite as salty, basically. So yeah, that's why we always go with rainwater, and definitely not seawater. Wouldn't be too good for our amphibians. They would not be very happy.
Next question is, are frogs hunted?
Certainly, yes. So many things eat amphibians. So lots of different predators will try to eat frogs and toads and newts. So we talked about fish, but also lots of birds, mammals, lots of things will tend to eat frogs. So frogs have a lot of eggs and tadpoles and lots of frog spawn, as do our other amphibians as well. But only a few of those will actually get to being adults, unfortunately. So that's their strategy, is that they have many, many offspring, many young, but many of them, unfortunately, will probably be eaten by something. But that's part of our natural life cycle.
Brilliant. So our next question is, how do you know that newts grow in a pond?
How do you know if newts grow in a pond?
How do you know that newts grow in a pond?
So one thing that you could do, and what we do for our amphibian surveys when we try to find out what are in ponds, is go out at night to the pond if it's safe to do so, and of course if you're with adults as well, and you can use a torch to look in the pond and see if there's any newts or other amphibians at that time, because a lot of them are very active at night in the spring and in the summer. So that can be a really good way to see if you've got newts in particular, because lots of people haven't actually seen newts before. They're a bit harder to see in ponds, but if you do go out at night with a torch, then you've got a chance to see them. But do always be careful around any ponds at night, because it's not very easy to see where you're going. So make sure you've got adults with you who can help you along.
Perfect. So our next question is, how big do frogs grow?
So our frogs will get to about 8 to 9 centimeters. So our male frogs, our boy frogs, are a bit smaller, and our female or our girl frogs will be bigger. So yeah, around about 8 to 9 centimeters for our common frog. And they're about the same size as our toads. Many people think that toads are larger, but not always the case. They're about the same size, but it does depend on whether it's a boy or a girl.
Okay. And then next one is, do frogs sleep in ponds, or do they leave the pond to sleep?
Very good question. So we talked about how deep the pond should be. So we'll find that some of our boy frogs in particular will actually go into an overwintering mode or hibernation in a way at the bottom of a pond, and they'll shut down there for the autumn and winter when it gets really cold. And that means that when it comes back around to spring and summer, they're ready to go. They're already at their pond where they need to be in spring and summer. However, many amphibians will go and find areas that they can have shelter and a bit of protection from the weather and protection from predators in nearby woodlands and scrub and near trees and things like this, and old mammal burrows. And then they can get away for those cold winter months, and they can make quite a long journey to get from pond to where they want to spend the autumn and winter. So the answer is, it's a bit of both. It may depend on what that particular amphibian or frog wants to do. They may spend that time at the bottom of a pond, or they may find somewhere on the land to spend the colder months.
Right. So our next question is, why is it bad for a pond to be a circle?
So if we have a very circular shape or a square shape, it will mean that we can't as easily have those shallow areas of the pond. So remember, the top 10 centimeters of the water surface is where we get the most plants and animals in our pond. And if it is a very sort of man-made shape in terms of a circle or similar, it's very difficult to get those shallow areas of the pond. So having those irregular outlines where the pond is kind of going in and out a little bit, certain areas, means we can have those areas of very sort of high, low water depth, and very shallow areas of the water where that biodiversity can do its thing and have as many animals and wildlife as possible.
Right. Next one is, are rusty metal bars over a pond bad for the water?
Rusty metal bars over a pond. I can't imagine they'd be very good. I'm sure they would affect the water quality. I presume we're talking maybe about a pond grill or something like that in particular. So I would definitely avoid anything like that as a pond grill or a mesh. There's certainly better options out there in terms of pond safety. So I would avoid that for sure if you can do. Yeah, it could create some bad water quality as things drop into the pond.
Next one for you, James, is how many different types of frog have you seen?
How many different types of frog have I seen? So we only have one species of frog in Scotland, and that is the common frog. So I am afraid to say I've only seen my one species of common frog so far in Scotland and within the UK, and that's it. So yeah, I've not managed to see any non-native frogs from different areas of the world, but I have definitely seen lots of different variety of our common frog, and it is amazing seeing what the different colours can be for our one species of common frog just within Scotland alone.
Great. Next question is, how do you know the right types of soil to use for a pond?
So the soil depends exactly what we're talking about here, but if we're talking about whether we need a pond liner or not, and what we can do is read our Just Add Water guide as well, if any of this is confusing, because it will tell you all about pond creation when you get around to it. Basically, if we have what we call free draining soils, they can be quite peaty, quite crumbly soil. So if you were to pick up the soil and roll it around in your fingers, it would crumble away. That kind of soil wouldn't hold water for any length of time that would be okay for our amphibians. So that kind of soil would be looking towards using a pond liner like we saw in the video and some of the photos as well. If you have soil that can roll up into a ball, it's almost like clay that you might make art out of as well. That will actually hold water. So that means that you might not need to use a pond liner and you can have a natural pond as well. If we're talking about in terms of ponds and planting and what soils to use, we always want to make sure that we're using soils with lower nutrient levels as well. So like we talked about on the first question, we don't want to have high nutrient levels in a pond that then will mean that certain bad plants that we don't want can take over. So we use something called aquatic compost or subsoil that's got lower levels of nutrients.
Great. Right, our next question then is, how did they find out that toads can climb trees?
Well, that's something that I need to read up on actually, because that is very new research from down in England. So there was a small feature on Springwatch, I believe it was a few months ago now, and there's also an article within our magazine all about it as well. So there was a study done on that to see why toads were going up trees, and it's a completely new phenomena, a new thing that we've learned about toads. So yeah, there'll be lots of things online that you can read about that, but that's something that I need to read up on as well. And I don't think we exactly know the reasons yet, but the best guess, like I say, is to get away from predators.
Great. Next one
Thank
is
you.
Oh,
sorry, that's all the questions we've got time for just now. But I see there's a few questions in the chat that haven't been answered, and I just wanted to reassure everyone that we will make a list of all your questions and we will make sure that they're all answered in a document in the resource folder that you already have the link to get all of the classroom resources for this lesson. So if you didn't hear an answer to your question just now, don't worry, we'll get one for you, because there's so many questions that are so good and I've enjoyed listening to the answers to all of them. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to James and to Ashley and Mirren for all of their really cool information about ponds, and the videos and the how-tos and all of the questions that you've answered. I really hope that some of you will be inspired to build a pond and will show us what you get up to. I wanted to make the link to Eco Schools before we head out, as I'm sure that many of you are familiar with that. Now, although we know not necessarily all of you are working to an Eco Schools Green Flag Award, but if you are and you're thinking about building a pond as part of your work, then this is what your action plan could look like and include. And you can see that the aim is to help and support wildlife, especially amphibians. Here are some actions that you could carry out as part of your Eco Schools Green Flag work. So first of all, for some good measuring and a good link to classroom learning, you could survey and map the garden to see what you've got, what habitats you've got, and to pick the best place to build your pond. And the resources that are from FrogLife will help you pick the best place to build your pond. And we've already been over the best shape and how it needs to have places for animals to climb out and the safest way to do so. And also the guide that James mentioned is in the resource folder as well, along with some other goodies for you too. And the next thing is you can fundraise for pond materials or plants if you need them. You can also contact local growing groups and our It's Your Neighbourhood and Beautiful Scotland groups. Many of them are near schools and would be happy to help you with expertise or perhaps even help you dig your pond or plant. Of course, you build the pond, and you could, as part of your fundraising, make a donation to FrogLife for all of their fantastic help and advice that they've given us today. And lastly, an extension activity, if you'd like, is we have our Young Reporters project, and we're looking for videos of stories of the kinds of things that you get involved with your Green Flag Award and other school activities. So what you might want to do is tell everyone the story of your pond by filming it as you go, and then you can send it in to us for Young Reporters. And not only will we share it on our Keep Scotland Beautiful blog, but we will enter it into a competition to win a prize, competing amongst young reporters from all over the world, where your video will be seen by loads and loads of people. So that's also very fun. And I see in the chat, there's a question about putting the video somewhere that can be shared, and I will speak to James about that and make sure that everyone is able to watch it, because I know there were some schools joining us today that couldn't see the video. So, and it is really helpful. So we'll make sure that it's somewhere you can see. But thank you so much to all the schools who have joined us today. And thank you so much to our friends at FrogLife for their time and their support and collaboration as well. I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson, and also hope you can join us for our next ones with Edinburgh Dog and Cat Home and Paws on Plastic. Thanks so much.